Christopher Nolan has made a movie with real ships, real oceans, and one of the most expensive productions in history, and quite possibly the most recognizable cast ever assembled. And somehow the most interesting thing about the trailer is how many people seem to hate it. Hey everyone, welcome to Mythology Explained. Over the last couple of months, I've made quite a few videos discussing Christopher Nolan's upcoming adaptation of the Odyssey. But after the release of the latest countdown trailer, the reaction surrounding this movie has become far more negative than I think anyone expected. The comment section is filled with people mocking the casting, the costumes, the accents, and the general direction of the film. And if we consider how popular Nolan is in general, the fact that one of his trailers has generated this level of hostility is pretty significant. Interestingly, Nolan recently dismissed much of the pre-release criticism as essentially irrelevant. His words, not mine, because no one criticizing the film has actually seen it yet. This is quite a bold thing for him to say. In a trailer, scenes are edited out of order, dialogue is removed from context, and a decision that looks completely ridiculous in isolation could make perfect sense once we understand what Nolan is actually doing. But at the same time, a trailer exists for one specific reason: to sell the movie. Universal released this footage because they wanted people to form an impression of the film and eventually buy a ticket. So while it is a bit unfair to declare the entire movie a disaster based on 2.5 minutes of carefully selected footage, it is completely fair to ask why those 2.5 minutes have left so many people less interested than they were before. Nolan may be right that we don't know what the finished film is yet, but the studio has now released multiple trailers attempting to show us, and for a large part of the audience, whatever they are showing doesn't seem to be working. And I think the biggest reason is actually much broader than one casting choice. It isn't just Lupita Nyong'o playing Helen, Elliot Page playing Sinon, Zendaya playing Athena, Travis Scott appearing apparently as a bard, or Matt Damon being cast as Odysseus. Those decisions may have started the controversy, but controversial casting doesn't automatically destroy a film. If the trailer had presented an unbelievably compelling story and shown audiences something they felt they had to see, then the casting probably would have become a secondary argument. People might still complain about individual actors or designs, but they would also be discussing the Cyclops, Odysseus' desperation to reach Penelope, the danger facing Telemachus, or the moment the king finally returns to Ithaca. Instead, the controversial choices have become the entire conversation because the trailer hasn't given people anything more powerful to replace them with. And this is especially surprising because the Odyssey should be one of the easiest stories imaginable to sell emotionally. A man leaves his wife and infant son to fight in a war. 20 years later, he is still trying to return home. His men are dead, a god is trying to prevent him from reaching Ithaca, monsters and supernatural forces stand between him and his family, and more than 100 men have moved into his palace, consumed his wealth, pressured his wife to remarry, and plotted to murder his son. He is fighting to recover his name, his family, and his kingdom. Universal is officially marketing the film as a mythic action epic, and visually there are certainly glimpses of that. We see armies burning structures, a giant whirlpool, ships being thrown through violent water, and Odysseus apparently leading soldiers into battle. The film was shot entirely with IMAX cameras, and the physical size of the production is probably the strongest thing being communicated. But scale and momentum are not the same thing. A trailer can show enormous locations and still feel strangely flat, and that is what appears to have happened here. Christopher Nolan is famous for keeping his movies mysterious, and the Odyssey itself is non-linear, beginning near the end of Odysseus' journey before allowing him to recount many of his earlier adventures through flashbacks. Nolan has described it as the original non-linear narrative, and that structure is probably one of the reasons he was attracted to it. But mystery still needs urgency. A trailer doesn't have to explain everything, but it should make the audience desperately want an answer. And I think that this is where the enormous cast actually becomes part of the problem. On paper, and I stress this point individually, the lineup is impressive. Matt Damon, Tom Holland, Anne Hathaway, Robert Pattinson, Zendaya, Charlize Theron, Lupita Nyong'o, Jon Bernthal, Mia Goth, blah blah blah. Most of these people are obviously extremely talented. But because the trailer hasn't yet made the ancient world feel completely convincing, the actors remain more recognizable as themselves than as the people they are playing. You don't necessarily see Telemachus confronting Antinous. You see Spider-Man arguing with Cedric Diggory. You don't immediately see the exhausted king of Ithaca. You see Jason Bourne or Will Hunting standing on a beach. You don't see Penelope defending her household. You see Andrea Sachs waiting for Jason Bourne to return from the Trojan War. It feels less like we have entered the world of Homer and more like Christopher Nolan has assembled every actor currently available in Hollywood and placed them inside the world's most expensive toga party. And this criticism is not entirely about ethnicity or representation. Matt Damon's casting has generated plenty of criticism as well, and that has nothing to do with whether he matches a particular modern political expectation. He is a highly recognizable American actor whose existing roles bring a huge amount of baggage with them, and for some viewers, the trailer has not done enough to make that baggage disappear. The same applies to Tom Holland, Robert Pattinson, Anne Hathaway, and Travis Scott, the most confusing casting of all to me. A famous cast can help sell a movie, but it can also weaken immersion when the world around them isn't strong enough to absorb their celebrity. Christopher Nolan is arguably one of the only directors alive who doesn't need this much star power to attract an audience, so this is particularly perplexing to me. The accents and dialogue only make that problem more noticeable. Now, there is no historically accurate English accent for an ancient Greek character. Having everyone speak with a British accent would not be any more linguistically authentic than having them sound American, and old Hollywood epics frequently used American voices anyway. But authenticity isn't always about literal historical accuracy. Sometimes it's about creating enough distance between the audience's everyday world and the world of the story. When Robert Pattinson's Antinous taunts Telemachus for waiting for his daddy, Tom Holland responds by talking about his dad, and Odysseus leads his men forward by shouting, "Let's go." The problem is not that Homer definitely used a different English phrase 3,000 years ago. The problem is that the dialogue sounds so familiar and contemporary that it collapses the atmosphere. Homer's characters don't need to speak in incomprehensible poetry for 3 hours, but their language should still help create the world. This is a story where people constantly define themselves through ancestry, household, honor, and their relationship with the gods. Odysseus isn't simply a guy who misses his wife. Telemachus isn't simply a boy with unresolved daddy issues. Not my word choice. And Antinous isn't merely an unpleasant man making fun of him. They occupy very specific places inside a political, religious, and social order that is collapsing because the king has disappeared. The visual design creates a similar problem. Nolan has clearly gone to extraordinary lengths to make the film physically real, but physical reality doesn't automatically create a believable world. Some of the armor looks Bronze Age inspired, some looks classical, some looks medieval, and some of it looks like Batman wandered into the wrong production. Certain ships have been criticized for appearing far more Nordic than Greek, while much of the footage has a grey, desaturated quality that makes the Mediterranean world feel strangely cold and lifeless. I don't need every ship, helmet, and sword to be reconstructed with perfect archaeological precision. The Odyssey is mythology, and Homer's poem itself reflects traditions from different periods, but a fantasy world still requires internal consistency. The Lord of the Rings is completely fictional, yet almost everything inside Peter Jackson's film feels as though it belongs to the same world. Nolan's Odyssey appears to be using real objects from several different visual traditions, but because those traditions don't always fit together, the result feels a bit invented. The other major problem is that the trailer doesn't always feel centered around Odysseus. Now, the Odyssey itself doesn't begin with him, and Telemachus and Penelope are both enormously important. The opening books focus on Telemachus attempting to discover what happened to his father, while Penelope's resistance to the suitors is essential to the story. So I'm not arguing that the film should reduce them to background characters while Matt Damon fights monsters for 3 hours. But the trailer moves between so many characters, timelines, locations, and conflicts that Odysseus' journey can feel like only one storyline among many. There's also the Emily Wilson translation. To be clear, Nolan has said that he drew from multiple translations, so it would be inaccurate to claim that the entire film is simply based on Wilson's version. But he has mentioned her work more than once, and her translation appears to have influenced the way the movie approaches the story. Wilson's Odyssey is direct, contemporary, and deeply interested in gender, slavery, hierarchy, and the people traditionally pushed into the background of heroic literature. Some of those choices are completely defensible, but not every decision can be dismissed as merely correcting the biases of earlier translators. At times, Wilson pushes the poem toward a very specific modern moral interpretation, making certain judgments more explicit than they are in Homer. This adds to the feeling that this is not simply Homer being brought to the screen. It's Homer being filtered, updated, and in some cases, actively corrected. And this is why I think the backlash has become so intense. I don't think everyone suddenly became an expert on Bronze Age Greek armor or memorized every word of the Odyssey. But we do not need to be classicists to feel that the world looks inconsistent, the dialogue sounds too modern, the actors remain distracting, and the story hasn't been presented with enough emotional momentum. Trailers are supposed to create anticipation, and this one just created arguments. Anyway, that's it for today's video. What did you think about the latest trailer? Let me know down in the comment section below, and as always, make sure to like the video and subscribe for more Mythology Explained. See you in the next one.